Hello, my name is Uri Monteros Gonzalez, and today I will be presenting A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. And this novel is set during a very important time in history called the French Revolution. In this presentation, I will discuss the author, historical background, setting, major characters, plot, and key literary elements used in the novel. A Tale of Two Cities, as you can see, this is the introduction. Introduction. A Tale of Two Cities is a historical novel written by Charles Dickens and published in 1859. The story takes place before and during the French Revolution. Dickens uses this violent period in history to explore themes such as sacrifice, justice, resurrection, and consequences of revenge. During the entire story, you can see the evolution of how the start of the story there wasn't any major conflicts in the middle where the French Revolution was happening and occurring, and the end where you can see it's still happening and it's at its peak form of violence. Charles Dickens' early life and career. Charles Dickens was born in 1812 in Portsmouth, England. He was young in his family, and his family struggled financially, and his father was sent to prison for debt. Because of this, Charles was forced to work in a factory, which greatly affected how he viewed poverty and injustice. Dickens, later on in his life, became one of the most successful and famous authors of the 19th century. He wrote about social problems such as child labor, poverty, and unfair treatment of the working class. His novels were meant to entertain readers while also teaching them moral lessons and showing past, future, or just historical content. The French Revolution. The French Revolution began in 1789 due to extreme inequality in France. The poor suffered from hunger and heavy taxes, while the wealthy lived comfortably in their houses and mansions. The revolution was meant to create freedom and equality, but it quickly turned violent, as they began to kill anyone suspected as treason, and the leaders that they picked were either selfish, like the nobles, or their causes weren't heard. That image of the lady with a flag is the most known image of the French Revolution and is one of the symbols of them. You can also see at the right an image of the prisoners lining up to be killed in a guillotine, while many spectators or people who hate the person that's going to be killed watching and celebrating. The Three Estates. French society was divided into three social classes called the estates. The first estate included the clergy, so it included pastors, cardinals, popes, anyone related to the Catholic Church of France. As in that time, the Catholic Church of England and many other parts were a little bit different. The second estate included nobles as the Marquis de Saint-Evremond and many others like the dukes and other social classes. And then the third estate included common people or everybody else, lawyers, doctors, farmers, poor, everybody. The reason for the revolution, this is very important, the three estates, as they all had one vote in the royal council. This was very unfair for the third estate, as the third estate had the majority of, it was at 80% of the population. So every time the first and second estate would vote something to raise taxes, they would always end into two on and one opposed, leading the third estate to suffer heavy taxes and heavy discrimination in that royal council. This pressure led them to separate themselves and take the tennis court oath to make something to make something just and fair for the poor and the common. The Bastille. The Bastille was a prison that represented power and corruption of the monarchy. People were sent there for no cause, no reason, as shown in the story, for Dr. Manette was sent there just because he saw the crimes of the Evremond family. He spent there 18 years unjustly and without being let go or heard trial. When this became a very powerful symbol of the revolution and resistance as they stormed it to take control of it and use it for ammunition. Effects of the revolution. The French Revolution led to the execution of King Louis XVIII and Queen Marie Antoinette. Thousands of people were killed during this time, many without fair trials, and Dickens shows how violence can continue even when the original cause was justice. This also, in this novel, is very much amplified, as this is one of the major plots of the story. As Darnay was going to France, he was sent to prison and sent to execution just because he was related to the Evremond family, which were part of the Second Estate and were nobles. Even the butler, in which was the cause for Darnay to going to France, was sent to trial. And many of these trials were very bad because they were voting against, and there weren't many votes. They were only for their own benefits, especially for the leaders. The leaders, just because you talk bad about them, you could be sent to death. Setting of the story. This novel is set in the late 1700s during the French Revolution, and the two main locations are London and Paris. These settings help show how different societies respond to conflict. In the story, London represents stability, law, and order, while Paris represents chaos, fear, and vengeance. Dickens uses this contrast to show the dangers of uncontrolled anger. As you can see, every time when the Manette family is in England or London, they don't suffer any perjury or any danger to themselves. While they're in France, Darnay was sent to prison and sent to execution. He was also in trial first. He was also early in the story sent to trial because he was accused of being a traitor or treason. But yeah. Now we're gonna go into the main and important characters of the story. These are the characters that the plot revolves against. And the first one is Charles Darnay. Charles Darnay is born into a cruel aristocratic family, the Evremond family. He rejects their violent behavior and tries to live an honest life. That's when he relinquished all his assets or rights of the Evremond family and moves to England, in which he then was accused of treason. Despite this, he is punished for his family's past actions, as you see later in the story when he was sent to death just because he was related to the Marquis of Saint-Evremond. Sidney Carton. Sidney Carton is an intelligent person but lacks confidence and purpose. At the beginning, he wasted his potential, but over time his love for Lucy inspires him to change and make a meaningful sacrifice of taking Charles Darnay's place during his death sentence. As they look very similar, and Sidney Carton also helped him in Darnay's trial when he was accused of treason, as they look similar, and his trial was later dismissed. Lucy Manette. Lucy Manette symbolizes love, compassion, and emotional strength. She helps her heal her father and brings people together. Lucy represents hope in a time of violence, and she also helps everybody that she sees, and that is the reason why Darnay falls in love with her. And Sidney Carton too. Dr. Manette. Dr. Manette spent many years in prison in the Bastille without a fair trial. Like I said, he spent 18 years exactly. This experience damaged his mental health, and his character represents the cruelty of an old French government. This basically is the monarchy preferring to protect their nobles instead of their majority of the population, making him broken, hopeless, and just waiting till he was set free. And still, when he was set free, he was still mentally broken and in despair. And without the help of his friends like Mr. Lorry or his daughter, he wouldn't have gotten out of this mental state. Madame Defarge. Madame Defarge is a strong revolutionary leader driven by revenge. She is also the wife of Mr. Defarge, the wine shop owner. They both have something against the Evremont family, as when they saw the Marquis de Saint-Evremont run over a boy with his carriage and threw a nickel at his father like that would fix it. Since that point, they've been hunting everybody. Her knitting also represents or symbolizes the death or something bad will happen to those characters. Her character shows anger and can destroy compassion. She also believes that all aristocrats deserve punishment by death. Plot. The novel begins with Dr. Manette's release and reunion with Lucy, as when he was finally released from the Bastille after his 18-year imprisonment, one of his former employees allowed him to stay at his house, and that was Mr. Defarge, who let him stay in his attic while his family got there at his wine shop. Darnay is falsely accused in England of treason, but is saved by Sidney Carton, as I was saying. These events introduce themes of resurrection and justice, or injustice, as you can say, as Darnay was trying to leave his family, but was falsely accused just because he is French. Now we're going into the middle plot. The French Revolution grows more violent and dangerous. This is when the revolution starts and Monsieur Defarge and Madame Defarge take roles as revolutionary leaders. Charles Darnay returns to France to help a former servant, and he is arrested and sentenced to death. And his trial was very unjust, as they were always voting for him, and Madame Defarge used the letter that Mr. Manette wrote about the crimes of the Evremont family against him. Now we're going to the ending or the closing plot, at which Sidney Carton switches places with Charles Darnay in prison to save his life. He sacrifices his life so Darnay can escape, and his family his final act gives meaning to his life. This is Sidney Carton basically holding his side of the promise that he did with Lucy many years ago, and during the story, which when he revealed that he was in love with her, he told her that he would do any sacrifice to keep her happy. Knowing that Darnay was in trouble, he went to France to sneak in there with the help of Dr. Manette, Mr. Lorry, and many other people. He swapped, and before he died, he said some words about seeing a family being happy and growing, and two lovers growing old together, and seeing the world being a prosperous and just society. This shows that he was compelling, and he was suppressed at the start, but then he became a man who was worthy in his eyes to do something noble and a good cause. Foreshadowing. Dickens uses foreshadowing to hint death and sacrifice. Repeated images of shadows, footsteps suggest danger, and these clues prepare readers for the tragic ending, as he foreshadowed, like I was saying, during Sidney Carton's reveal to Lucy Manette that he loved her and he would do any sacrifice to keep her happy. This was a foreshadowing that he would swap places with Darnay to save her, to save him, and to make Lucy happy and live a life. He also uses many other things like in symbolisms. He uses many symbolisms, like, for example, the spilled wine barrel. When in the second chapter of the story, there was a wine barrel that fell off a cart and spilled everywhere, and every person rushed in there to grab a sip of wine. In the story, they refer to these people as crows, crows that are hungry for blood. There is also a man who uses his last bit of wine to write on the wall, blood. This foreshadows the chaos and cruelty of the revolution after killing or after capturing King Louis XVIII. Many other symbolisms are like Dr. Manette's shoemaking tools that represents what he did, or his suffering in prison, and what he did to get out of that mental state of suffering, and he focused all of that into one thing to ignore everything else. That was making shoes that kept him comfort. Also, his Dr. Manette's lock of Lucy's hair. This is a symbolism. That was his symbol of hope and to keep going until they would let him free to see his little girl. There's also many other symbolisms, like when Charles Darnay, is a very big foreshadowing, left the family. He was trying to avoid their violence, but that later on saved them because they all got killed or sentenced to death. But just because he went to save his former servant, he was also sent to death. If he didn't go to France, none of that last part of the story would have gone or happened. This shows that he was he avoided something without even knowing it, and something very important to the story. Theme. One major theme is sacrifice for others, like Sidney Carton sacrificing his life for Darnay so Darnay could live on with Lucy. Another theme is resurrection and personal change, like when Dr. Manette got out of prison. He was a shallow man. He couldn't think. He was frail. He was skinny, and he was always in and out of consciousness. Like, not really. He could move, but he wouldn't answer you because he couldn't think. He was thinking of nothing and always not thinking. Later on, thanks to Lucy, Mr. Lorry's help, and Darnay's help, he became the man he was once known. A doctor, a man who helps people, a person who has wisdom to help others. This is one of the best change that you can see. Also, another of personal change is Sidney Carton. This is the most known, as Sidney Carton in the start was depressed, sad, thinking he was not worthy of his life, thinking he wasted his life, thinking he could never be with somebody as pretty as Lucy, thinking he could never make somebody smile, nothing, to later seeing himself as worthy of his life, as he didn't waste it because he held up a promise that he did with Lucy Manette. This was the major personal change. Also, the novel also warns about the dangers of revenge, as this is also shown as the Defarges wanting revenge against the Evremont family for their crimes, or any aristocrat or any person in the second estate, any person with wealth, money, or with social power. They wanted revenge for their mistreating all of the taxes that they put on the civilians, all of the people that starved to death because they couldn't afford food thanks to the taxes. This story is immaculate. Irony. It is ironic that Carton, who sees himself as worthless, becomes a hero. Like I was saying, he changed himself. This is a crazy change, and many things that you can see as personal change could also see ironic. That, like, they believed, like the French people believed, that making a revolution would fix everything. But the irony is, it became even more injustice, even more chaos, even more starvation. even more everything, and that started the first coalition war against England and France and many other countries like Persia, because they were boasting about throwing away their monarchy while all of them were monarchies. And without many military figures or leaders like Napoleon, they would have lost those wars and would have become again a monarchy like they were. Conclusion. A Tale of Two Cities shows how love sacrifice can exist during violent times. Dickens teaches that compassion is stronger than hatred, and the novel leaves readers with a powerful message about humanity said by Sidney Carton at the end before he died. Overall, this story is amazing, is great for many new readers. It has many plot changes, many ironies, many symbolisms. Everything that you would want to see in a good story is there. You have love, you got chaos, you got death, you have everything. And if you're one of everything, this is historical. So think about it like if it happened, even though it didn't, because it has actual historical context with it, as the French Revolution. Charles Dickens used all of his experience for this novel, and it's still being read and still being classed as one of the best novels he has done. This story is amazing, a 10 out of 10 reader, and anyone who wants to read a good book that isn't more than 200 pages and isn't more than 10 chapters has to read this book. Even though the copy that we read was shorter, the original copy should have more things, more symbolisms, more difficult words, more complex images. This was all a masterclass made by Charles Dickens, and this story is a 10 out of 10, a good reader, and it's very commonly found. There's a lot of copies of it, a lot of versions of it. There's even a movie. There is everything, and if you don't want to read, you can just watch the movie. It's absolutely great for news readers, as it's not that long compared to many novels, as this is technically a novel, but you could call it under a short story because it has very little pages. At least for me, because I consider more than 2 pages a normal story. This for me is short, as it was very good. Only 10 chapters. For a novel, that was great. And that's it. Basically a 10 out of 10 book. Any teacher that knows that their students like reading books should put them onto this.